Hello, I'm Richard Corbett from emergebydesign.net, and welcome to my weekly transit forecast starting on Monday, January 27th. Well, we are 1 week in to the 2025 Rave New Year. From the human design perspective, the new solar year happens when the sun enters gate 41, line 1. That is precisely at 2 degrees Aquarius, and it always happens around January 21st, sometimes January 22nd. That was almost a week ago. It doesn't match up with our Gregorian traditional calendar of having New Year's Eve on December 31st and New Year's Day on January 1st. It's always when the sun enters gate 41, which is the start codon for a new cycle of experience. Well, we're 1 week into that just about, and so we're still just getting off the ground. And that Rave New Year that happened on the 21st last week happened at the third quarter phase of the moon. So she's been in her waning phase this past week, and we're going to have the first new moon of this Rave New Year on Wednesday, the 29th. And I'll be taking a close look at that chart when we get to it. But I want to bring all that up just to say that we're in the final 2 days of this lunar cycle. Wonderful time every month or month, where the word comes from, to reflect and collect. Do some self-nourishing. Maybe look back at the past month and all that we've been through and where we've come from and what we may have learned from our last cycle of emotional experience and where we might be going this lunar month. And being the first new moon of the year, it really feels to me like the first chapter of our emotional cycle of development this year. Now, the sun has moved into gate 19, line 1 in Aquarius. Gate 19 is found in the root center at the bottom of the body graph. It's called a root pressure gate. It is part of the channel of synthesis, a design of being sensitive. Its harmonic gate on the other end is called gate 49. Now, one of the interesting things about the two gates that form this channel is that they are both found in the sign of Aquarius. If we look at the sun in the astrological wheel here and the Rave mandala, the sun is in gate 19.1, where it will be for just short of a week. Then the sun will move into gate 13, and then the following week after that, right into gate 49. So these two gates that form the channel are separated with gate 13 in the middle. I've always felt like that really sends a very strong message about the channel of synthesis. This particular archetype and frequency of that channel has to do with how we form our intimate emotional bonds with others. Sometimes it's been nicknamed the channel of courting. When we first meet someone, we're asking questions, getting to know each other, seeing if the other person might have the right principles and background as values that we do, whether or not we might want to enter into an eventual commitment or bargain with each other. But this is at the early stages of this. So gate 19 being the pressure to need the support of the other, and because we're in a tribal circuit group and channel, it's a very sticky situation. We're always needing the support of others and also needing to offer support. So it's a very two-way street here with this energy. And I also find this particular channel that I'm talking about very important right now, because if we think about the mutation that we speak about in the human design community, we know that the solar plexus center is undergoing a great mutation. The exact time of that that was delivered to us from Ra will be in February of 2027. So we're only 2 years away from that. And I bring that up because with the sun here this week and then gate 49 in a couple of weeks, we're going to have this year, then 2026, then 2027, and then we'll have the mutation taking place in the solar plexus. So that's a large topic. I think my partner, Brandy Jordan, and I will do another video talking about 2027 as we keep getting closer to it. But I bring it up now because this is really at the heart of a large background frequency of what we're going through right now. Learning about how to be in what we might call nine-centered relating. The idea where I can live my truth, follow my personal authority and my personal strategy at all times, but yet still be able to support and be in a relationship with another and allow that other person to have their autonomy and their sovereignty to follow their authority. Sometimes it can feel like a bit of a tightrope. And we talk about this a lot in Emerge by Design as we ourselves are learning how to do this and share it with others as six-line beings. So, yes, that's where we are. We're in a deeply sensitive area of our body this week with this life force energy going through all six lines of gate 19. And so, in that regard, it will be a helpful time as we look at the transit field. And I'm always approaching this as looking at what the frequency is through the planetary movements and conversations they have with each other. And how does that relate to me personally? How does that fit into my body graph, my natal chart, and see where I may be able to work with these frequencies? But at all times, following my personal authority. These transits, we can get caught up in the noise of the collective world out there and lose our sense of balance and foundation. So I'm always encouraging us as we look at transits to remember that we follow our authority, and that's how we can engage with these energies or not. But certainly the overall frequency is one of needing the support or offering the support to the other. And we also find the topic in relationship here of interdependency. That's actually the name of the first line of Gate 19. How can we maintain individual sovereignty and truth, yet still engage emotionally with the other? So we also think of the word codependency, where we may be devaluing or ignoring our sense of truth and integrity at the expense of supporting the other. And again, that is a very large topic that Brandy and I often talk about because it's a very important piece of our evolution and our humanity right now, as this solar plexus and our emotional way of interrelating is going through dynamic changes right now. So we're getting a taste of that this week for sure. It also becomes a little more sensitive, even though it's the channel of sensitivity, it's even more sensitive right now because Mars, the god of war, is still in retrograde, which he only goes into retrograde every couple of years. So it doesn't happen that often. And he's still in retrograde in the home sign of the moon in Cancer. Currently, Mars is in gate 62, the gate of details. But this is a gate in Cancer. It's very emotional because it's associated with the moon. And with Mars in retrograde in this watery sign of the moon, Mars can be very sensitive and very reactive. Mars is not is so comfortable here. This is, considered his fall or detriment, and meaning that he's not capable to exert himself in the normal fiery, aggressive energy that he likes to. And because of that, he can be somewhat emotionally reactive right now. So just mentioning that as we go through this week, we have a lot of planets in Pisces. So I am forecasting quite an emotional week. And the benefit of that is that we get to look internally for ourselves. How am I coping with this strong emotional week? What am I learning about myself? Where am I seeing possible issues from my past or emotional wounding that I haven't dealt with yet? Some of these may effervesce to the surface this week, and I think it's helpful just to be aware of that. So, yes, Sun in gate 19. Now, what that does is put the opposite polarity of that, the Earth, where the grounding is, in gate 33, called the gate of privacy and the gate of retreat in the throat center. This is indicating that we may be able to find some stability this week from actually retreating into a quiet space. Having that time to process and contemplate can be very grounding this week. And yeah, before I move forward, just to mention, let's take a quick look at Pisces here. We have quite a conflagration of planets here. We actually call this a stellium whenever we have three or more planets all bunched up in the sky. So we have a stellium forming in the sign of Pisces, ruled by Neptune and mutable water. This is part of what's going to be bringing us so many of the solar plexus gate activations and the emotional quality to the week. Additionally, we can see here in Aquarius, we have Pluto, which has finally moved into Aquarius back in November 19th, where it will stay for almost the next 20 years. He's finally left Capricorn behind, but he's still in gate 60. Now, shortly, not long from now, and I'll cover this in my report, but Pluto is going to move into gate 41 moving forward, but he's going to go retrograde later in the year, and he will move back into gate 60 on August 20th of 2025, and will be in gate 60 line 6 until December 5th. So we still have Pluto transiting gate 60 where he's been for, I guess, over 3 years now. And there's one more last bit of unfinished business that he will take care of as we get to later in the year. And I think that will be a very, very interesting and pivotal time for the Plutonic work of death, rebirth, and transformation he's doing in gate 60. So we will certainly come back to that in the coming months. But he is still there currently in gate 60, line 6, the gate of limitations and the channel of mutation. So we're still moving into an Aquarian energy of what does it mean to understand the truth of my limitations? How can I heal, alchemize, and turn these challenges into a gift I can share with others? Now, Mercury is already moving into a conjunction with Pluto, and as of Monday, Mercury these charts are all run for noon Mountain Time. He's in gate 60, line 4. So we're going to be having a Mercury Pluto conjunction in this gate. Now, this will be the first time Mercury has been conjunct Pluto since he's moved into Aquarius for good, and if I could say it that way. Now, what I want to say here is that Mercury is very comfortable in Pluto's world. In Greek mythology, they actually had a very good relationship. Mercury was the messenger. He could travel to the underworld and back and forth. He carried Pluto's helmet of invisibility. And so when we think of Mercury, I mean, on the one hand, this is the planet that represents how we communicate and share ourselves with others. But from a personal level, Mercury also helps us understand ourselves. He's never very far from the sun in the chart, always within 28 or 29 degrees. So he's never far in the wheel. And I mention that because with Mercury conjunct Pluto, we may be able this week to have a new sense of integration of the work that Pluto has been doing in our gate 60. So I would keep an eye on that. Just whatever limitations or sense of challenge you may have been dealing with in the past, this current history, Mercury being here this week may have some insights to offer. When I think of Mercury, I often think of the inscription on the Temple of Apollo in Delphi, which says, "Know thyself." And Mercury is the planet that can help us do that. He can help us go into our own shadow world and uncover the hidden truths and gems that exist there. So that is part of the mix this week. That'll be happening Monday, Tuesday. Now let's go ahead and look forward into Tuesday. On Tuesday, we can see the moon is at 29 degrees Capricorn, currently in gate 60 as well. So this puts the moon, Mercury, and Pluto in that gate 60. So we're already getting a taste of some emotional frequency from her. And so it's really elevating the developmental story that's happening down here in gate 60 in the root pressure. So again, really great contemplation as we look forward to the new moon in Aquarius, which will be happening on Wednesday. Here on Tuesday, this is the last night of this lunar cycle. So I know for myself, I'll be reflecting, maybe do some journaling, thinking again where I'm come from, where I'm going, and what are my current intentions of what some of the dreams I may have for this coming year. Being the first new moon of the year, this can be a very fertile soil to contemplate these things, to get that sensation of fulfillment of where we'd like to be moving in our life, in spite of all of the, well, how else can I say it, craziness of the planet right now. Things are really heating up. You know, we had Pluto change signs in November. We're going to have Neptune and Uranus changing signs very soon. It's very unusual to have all three outer planets changing signs in such a short time period, and a number of other things happening this year. If you follow any other astrologers, pretty much across the board, everyone is agreeing in the fact that the things we're seeing in the sky are unprecedented. And so it may give this sense of tremendous tumultuousness. it can sometimes feel overwhelming. We've got a lot of activity going on in gate 36 right now, which I'll be talking more about. But just want to remind everyone that these things are happening for a reason, and we get the opportunity to grow and development as a result of them. Now, yeah, so big emphasis here, I think, on Tuesday in gate 60. And additionally, we have, I just want to highlight here, so we have Saturn, which had been in retrograde for quite a while in gate 63 in the head center in the gate of doubt. He was doing some restructuring about what we may consider our previous logic to have been and how he is restructuring it to adapt to the future. And now Saturn has moved into gate 22. So we're back into a solar plexus gate here. This is the energy of individual emotional expression. And I think we're all going to get a lot of opportunities during this week ahead to take a look at our emotional chemistry, how we're self regulating, how are we dealing with these sensitive interactions with our loved ones, and what is the upshot of that? Could so certainly not a fortune teller here, but I think these will be part of our conversations in how am I getting support from the other and how are they needing some support from me as well. Uh, yeah, and we can see that this conjunction forming up here with the moon, Mercury, Pluto, and the sun. As you can see, we have a very focused energy this week with a lot of planets in Aquarius, fixed air, fast. It's intellectual, conversational, and it's very Aquarian, right? Aquarius is, human design is a very Aquarian tool. This idea of individual truth and sovereignty, and not only do I own that, but I respect yours as well. And that's layered on with the other stellium of planets in Pisces, where we're in the world of Neptune and the ocean, and it's watery and mystical and spiritual. So it's quite a juxtaposition of energies that we're seeing right now. And we can see that Venus herself is in gate 36, where as we still have Neptune here in gate 36, and they're moving to a conjunction in gate 36, line 6. So let me not jump too far ahead. I'm going to get to that because we're going to have quite a lineup by the end of the week when we get to gate 36. And I also want to mention another planet that makes a shift on Tuesday. Jupiter, also traveling in retrograde as Mars is. Jupiter's retrograde in Gemini here has been traveling back through gate 35, the gate of progress. And Jupiter has reached it's about to stop and station and turn forward again, and that is going to happen here in gate 16. We're going to get Jupiter in gate 16 for 2 weeks. And then he'll be back into gate 35 moving forward. So I've talked about this in some of my previous reports over the past couple of months. I really felt like if you were having the sense of a lack of progress, it had to do with Jupiter going retrograde. He is the planet of abundance and expansion. Anything Jupiter touch grows, but when he's going retrograde, we can feel an expansive energy of not growing. And so I think it'll be curious as we move forward in time and we watch Jupiter go through gate 35, and we're going to have some activations in gate 36. We're going to get a strong dose of the channel of transitoriness, a design of a jack of all trades. As I say that, I want to remind that that was the only defined channel at the Rave New Year chart last week. I also want to mention that my partner and beloved Brandy Jordan at emergebydesign.net, she did a beautiful Rave New Year report and she wrote it. It's there on our Facebook page if you want to check it out. I highly encourage that. It gives a very descriptive imagery for what we're going to be going through this year as a background frequency. So, with Jupiter here now turning forward, this is where in a couple of weeks, as he's moving forward in 35, I'm curious to see what that feels like, if we can get a sense of progress. But I mentioned Brandy's new Rave Year report because that channel of transitoriness. We are in a new cycle of development. There's no question about it. And even this week, when we have that two planets and the North Node line up in 36, yeah, we're going through something new, and it's called the gate of crisis because it's new. When we go into any experience for the first time, there is a lot of unknowns. And we're going through that now with all of these large astrological transits that we're going to be experiencing this year. So again, there'll be a lot of opportunity to get lost out there in the greater world and lose our sense of self. We might either be avoiding or projecting, but where the chart is asking us to go is to our higher self. What does this mean to me and my authority as I go through this new cycle of development? But yeah, Jupiter made that shift there on Tuesday. Now let's go ahead and take a look at Wednesday. Now this is the only chart that I'll show this in this report that is not for um, noon. This is actually for the exact minute of the new moon, which is 5:35 a.m. Mountain Time, and that is going to be taking place. The sun and the moon at their conjunction at the new moon will be in gate 19, line 3. So we can look at the symbolism of this chart and think about what's going to happen in this coming lunar cycle. We're dealing with a great deal of sensitivity. We are dealing with how am I offering my energy and my emotional support to others, and how am I needing it back? And it deals with topics of respect and empathy and care and compassion, but it can also lead to codependency, where we're losing our sense of integrity and self respect, and sometimes overgiving, over delivering, and sacrificing out of fear and not authority. So this new moon is speaking to that. It's also, um, again, we have not only the new moon here at the 9 degrees, almost 10 degrees of Aquarius, but Mercury is still in that conjunction with Pluto, although at the time of the new moon, Mercury will be in gate 41, line 1. Which is where I mentioned that's where the actual Rave New Year started last week when the sun was there, but Mercury's there now. And here we have Venus in that gate 36 lining up with Neptune, and we're actually going to have a nodal shift on the next day in gate 36. So a lot of Piscean energy. Most of the gates of the solar plexus center are found in the sign of Pisces. And we can see currently in this chart, we have 2 activations in the solar plexus and 2 activations coming from the root pressure center. And so we have a lot of orientation toward this emotional cycle of development. And additionally, one thing that's building right here is this Jupiter in retrograde at 11 degrees Gemini is forming a trine with that new moon. Now, it's an interesting Sun, Moon, Jupiter transit. It is a trine, which we might say that that's very supportive and communicative. It's a flowing conversation, but to remember that Jupiter is retrograde still. He is stationing in gate 16, which is called the gate of skills. But Jupiter, while planets are stationary, they're not hardly moving at all in the night sky if we get to look at them, but they do bring tremendous power, energy, and frequency with their being stationary. Um, and this gate 16 says a whole lot about refinement of an experience. Uh, it's about skill, and it's logical, and it's how do we make it better. So as we're looking at this very Piscean, solar plexus, emotional upheaval in the world, Jupiter here now is saying there's something we can learn to be skillful in how we share that experience in regards to our perspective. And let's see. Um, I think that was, oh, and I also haven't brought it up yet. I want to mention Uranus. Uranus is going to be turning direct this week, so he's still stationed. And again, when all of these planets, when they're actually stationed, they're not moving, they are bringing tremendous energy with their inertia. And that's happening in gate 23, line 5. Now, Uranus had already spent over an entire year in gate 23, left gate 3, moved into gate 8 for a number of months, and has now come back for his final visit to 23. Once Uranus leaves gate 23, we won't see him back there for about 84 years. So, there's a lot to contemplate there, but we have the planet of shock, change, revolution in the gate of individual expression called assimilation. And so I think this again is a large backdrop to what all of the noise going on in the world is stimulating in us. It is stimulating us to find our own voice of truth, to share our personal inspirations and higher self of what this all means to us. But we're finding a creative, shocking energy in this creative frequency. So interesting contemplation there. How your life right now is supporting and nourishing your own sense of creativity as we move into this turbulent future. Okay, let's go ahead and move this into Thursday. Now, on Thursday, we have our nodal shift. You know, the nodes are always moving in retrograde in the wheel, and we now have the north node backing into gate 36, line 6, and the south node in its polarity at gate 6, line 6. The nodes always move from line 6 back to line 1 and then into the next gate. Now, these two gates are called friction, conflict, and crisis. Well, they're pretty heavy keynotes that Ra gave us for these, but again, they speak to the cyclical nature of life itself. Whether we have a defined solar plexus in our body graph or an undefined, we all are living in the frequency of the solar plexus and learning how to become more emotionally aware and emotionally mature. And with the nodes representing the outer world and what we may encounter, again, we're feeling a charged atmosphere of emotional instability. But there's no reason to fear that. Anytime I'm feeling dysregulated, I'm always encouraging myself, take some deep breaths, pick up my modalities that bring me back to a sense of grounding. I like to go for hikes or walks in nature to connect with the ocean and the birds and the trees, and that can really bring a sense of stability. But we are going to be having these nodes in the solar plexus here for the months ahead, and so I think it's going to be very supportive for us to recognize that. Again, mentioning that Mars retrograde in Cancer there, I think as we head towards the weekend this week, it may feel emotionally volatile in some situations. So nothing to fear, but to be aware and to follow our authority. And if we are dysregulated in our body, we have a place to go to find our sense of grounding. So now in this chart on Thursday, the moon is at the very end of Aquarius, and the moon has moved into gate 30, also in the solar plexus. Now the moon will change signs into Pisces in gate 30, line 6. So it's one of those 12 gates where the astrological signs change within a gate. But what I'm getting at is, just a few hours after this noontime chart on Thursday, we are going to have the moon conjunct the north node in gate 36, line 6. Venus is going to move into gate 36, line 6, and we have Neptune in gate 36, line 6. Well, I've talked about gate 36 as the gate of crisis and the emotional change of a new cycle of experience. And we're also thinking about the line 6 because all of these energies are converging there. Line 6 is the line of truth and integrity. And so, we can think about that in our own emotional experience. Are we becoming more emotionally mature? Are we behaving with less emotional reactivity? This may be a challenge as we move into Thursday, Friday. The other thing I've been mentioning and thinking about is that Mars, as of Thursday, at 20 degrees Aquarius, I'm sorry, of Cancer, is forming a square with Chiron moving forward in gate 51, line 5. Now, with Mars retrograde already feeling somewhat sensitive and possibly overreactive in areas concerning our emotions and our family and so forth, lining up in a dynamic energy with Chiron, the wounded healer. Again, this is offering an opportunity where we may need to call on our higher self and our authority to regulate and stabilize any volatile emotional conversations that arise out there. Again, I never have fear looking at these transits, but I do appreciate the awareness. So when that instance comes about, it's no surprise. I'm like, well, yep, I knew I was going to be challenged with my emotional reactions this week. What can I learn from this? How can I develop my maturity as I move through this experience, both regarding the respect for my higher self, but also for the other person as well? Um, and if we take a look, as I mentioned, Saturn still in that gate 22, we can see Venus right here is heading towards her conjunction with Neptune. They're only one line apart. So, with all of these layers of frequencies and conversations I've been mentioning here, we're definitely moving into the emotional world of Pisces. But the support here can come from the fact that Neptune, the ruler of the seas, and Pisces gives us almost a portal to our spirituality and our imagination and our unlimited sense of creativity. Neptune knows no bounds. It is outside the limits of Saturn, being far beyond Saturn. And so, in that sense, even though it can feel emotionally turbulent right now, we also can have access to things that we don't have every day due to all of these planets supporting us in the sign of Pisces. So there are things to look to and go towards that can support us in this cycle of development. And while the moon is in that gate 30 at the time of this chart and still having Mercury in gate 41, we're also getting the channel of recognition, a design of focused energy. And here again, we're getting this drumbeat and pressure for change. We're ready for something new. But where we're going, we may not exactly know, but we're certainly getting a taste of this on Thursday. Is there's got to be more out there. Now, again, look at that solar plexus, really getting lit up with all of these activations and the conjunctions in gate 36. It's not very common that we see this many frequencies all piled up in the solar plexus right here. So just good to be aware of. Okay, let's go ahead and take this into Friday. The sun will have moved into gate 19, line 5. And oh, and I mentioned the nodal shift. I mentioned it, but the nodes, yeah, the nodes have moved into that 36.6. So I'll talk more about this in the coming weeks as we are getting comfortable with this new frequency and what that may mean for this cyclical cycle of development that we're in. But look what happens on Friday here. The moon has now moved into Pisces. So now we have the moon, Saturn, Neptune, North Node. That doesn't happen very on. This is a lot of frequency in Pisces here. And also the sun at that 12 degrees of Aquarius in gate 19, line 5, it's forming a half square with the Venus-Neptune conjunction. A half square is a very dynamic, hot energy. It's like a square. It's like there's things happening that we're looking for something to be resolved. And when we think about A36 and the emotional change and crisis that it brings, in a dynamic conflictive energy with gate 19 and the line of sacrifice, again, I think I'm painting a picture here where, again, tremendous opportunity for emotional growth and development. So let's keep our heads about ourselves. And I think that we'll all typically be served quite well if we can be less reactive and more intentional as we have these conversations with so much emotional energy on the table right here. And while that's happening, we still have the Jupiter trine the sun. Right? So this is just bringing a lot of that expansive Jupiter energy, which can inflame things, right? Jupiter, although it's a planet of good fortune, sometimes too much is too much. And so when you add the Jupiter frequency and the Mars retrograde, and we can see here again on Friday, that square with Chiron is getting stronger. There's a lot of dry emotional tinder right here. And so we just want to be mindful that in some areas we may see in the greater collective world, things may catch fire. I'm even thinking of the LA fires, right? We can feel the intensity of energy out there across the globe. So let's go ahead and take it into Saturday. Okay, get my chart here. So the sun wrapping up its tour through gate 19 will be in line 6 today. Again, we can see the aspects in the wheel here, how they're getting brighter red. That's that sun is forming that half square with this Venus, Neptune, um, North Node and the moon. See, the moon is making conjunctions with all these planets during this 2.5 days that she will be traveling through Pisces. I just, as I keep sort of sharing the message here, I'm just getting a great sense of how we can tap into this world of Pisces. I just cannot think of a better time when connecting with our emotions, observing them, holding space for our emotions, and really having some sort of outlet to express them. Whatever you may feel is your creative outlet, writing, dancing, singing, or like for myself, walks in nature, putting ourself in that space right now can really help us connect, I think, with the moon's energy. Of course, she's past her new moon now, so we're in her waxing phase. She'll be growing in illumination every minute of every day. And so, we can flow with that, right? There's energy to move our emotional development forward this week, I would say, in spades. Mars continuing retrograde in Cancer has backed into gate 53 down here in the root pressure. And so this is called the gate of beginnings. It's the pressure to start a new cycle of experience, which I know we're going to be feeling. You can also see in the wheel that Uranus finally turned forward. And so here is that shocking frequency in the 23 of assimilation here. We may, as these planets one by one that have been retrograde are turning forward, Jupiter will be falling along before too long. We may get a sensation here that we can move some things forward that may have felt a bit stagnant. And certainly with Mars in that gate 53, bringing that fiery pressure to start a new cycle of development. And I mentioned the channel of transitoriness. Again, we're getting a sense that we're in a transition phase right now, where things may start to move. Now we don't know what direction, but we will follow our authority and see what cycle of development that puts ourselves in. And let's move it into Sunday. And as we get to Sunday, now the sun, by the time we get to the noon chart on Sunday, had already moved into gate 13 all the way through line 1. So as I show you the noontime chart on Sunday, the sun is already at gate 13, line 2. This gate is in the G center of the higher self. It's part of the channel of the prodigal, and it is the gate of the listener. And the line 1, it's one of my favorite lines of gate 13. It's called the line of empathy. And as I was talking about the channel of sensitivity at the beginning of this report, I was saying that, man, what a beautiful place for the sun to go through as we wrap up this calendar week here on Sunday. The gate of the listener, listening with empathy. What a powerful force we can all be right now as everyone's dealing with their emotional stuff, drama, cycles, family, children, relationships. All of this is on the table this week. But when we can listen with an ear of higher self, of truth and identity, with empathy, it can be a game changer. So I really enjoy the fact that the sun is moving in to gate 13 by the end of this week. I think that will go a long ways in towards of us uncovering the wounds of our chironic square to Mars, what may be triggered in that sense, maybe issues with our family that we're still working on from the past, and how we can move that dial forward into some emotional maturity. I think all of that is really part of the mix here. And another movement that happened on Sunday I want to mention is that Venus, moving forward in Pisces, has moved into gate 25, line 1. Well, that's over here in the G center as well. This is the gate of the spirit of the higher self. It's also called universal love. It speaks very much to the idea of innocence, being innocent in our higher self. a lack of preconditions. Now, what brings now Chiron, who I've been talking about, he doesn't get an activation in the human design system in the body graph. But if we just look at it, the degree and the wheel of where he is, well, that would put Chiron right here. He's been in this gate 51. And so now we have Venus in 25. And if we put Chiron there just to contemplate, that would put Chiron here. And so we're getting this Venusian energy, the planet of love, harmony, tranquility. What we really want is what our personal Venus represents. Well, we're wanting to move past the shock and initiation of whatever's been uncovered while Pluto has been in gate 60. Right? Things have come to the surface that we may have pushed under the rug, we may not have dealt with for many years, but we are in a time where we can no longer hold it back or push it under the rug. It is urging us to take a look at it, to be aware to our shadow world where we have repressed things or project them onto others. So I think that while Venus is in this channel of initiation, we may find ourselves also in situations that stimulate that. And I encourage us all to be curious about it. With that Mars retrograde, it can be so easy to fall into the victim mode or the blame mode and pointing fingers at others. But I certainly think the symbolism here is saying, okay, this is what's happening out here. What can I be curious about inside of myself that will nourish me and support me as I grow into my sense of higher truth and inspiration? Okay, well, I think that's all I had for this week. Thank you so much for listening. If you got some value out of this, I always appreciate the likes or the subscribe button. And I hope you all have a wonderful new moon in Aquarius. I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, and bye for now.